Welcome to Hebrew Shebrew, the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. This has been a challenge, but also a good challenge as well. It's a different way of seeing the Torah portions and seeing God's word through the lens of relationships. And what we mean by relationships, it's not just our relationship with Yeshua, but relationships with one another, with people around us in regards to our family, our friends, our co-workers, and of course our relationship with God as well. But when we're looking at it differently, it opens up your eyes to a completely different way. So let's dig in. We are in Exodus.
Yep, we're in Exodus or Shema, chapter 21, verse 1 through 24:18. This parsha is called Mishpatim. That basically means judgments, ordinances, perhaps righteous judgments and ordinances. And these are going to be a lot of the things that are going to govern the relationships, help us to have smooth relationships between each other. Yeah. That's definitely the beginning part of it. And then as we get towards the end of the Torah portion, it cycles and transitions a little bit more towards your vertical relationship. Mm-hmm. So let's dig in. Let's read chapter 21, verse 7 through 11.
Sure, 7 through 11. And if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. And if he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. What am I reading to? 11. Thank you. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. And if he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money.
All right, so this sounds a little strange to us in our culture and our context, but one thing that we're just going to take away from this is that we see that the wives, even in the ancient Near Eastern culture, they have rights in a marriage, especially in Yah's culture and in Elohim's culture. We see three things. It lists three things, right? They list food and covering and marriage rights or conjugal rights. And if these three rights weren't given to the woman, then she was able to leave without repayment of the price that was paid to her father. Now we can basically take these three things and subdivide them into three categories. One being provision, one being protection, and one being intimacy. So we can see that it was the husband's duty there to provide, to protect, and to be intimate with his wife. So let's go now over to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We're going to read verses 3 through 5, and we're going to learn a little bit more about one of these categories.
3 through 5. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, lest Satan tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
So Paul is discussing the marital rights, the conjugal rights of both husbands and wives in this section. His main point is to maintain self-control. We recognize self-control as one of the fruits of the Spirit, right? We'll get to that a little bit later in this. But if we get on down to verse 9, it says, if they don't have self-control, let them marry, for it's better to marry than to burn, that is, to burn with sexual desire. So part of what he's getting at is that, we as humans, we do have these needs. In a marriage, both husbands and wives have needs that must be provided for by their spouse. Now, there's a lot of things we have need for that our spouses can't do for us. We trust in Elohim to do those things. But there are things that our spouse is required to do for us. And both husbands and wives need to have intimacy.
Yeah.
So when you're talking with someone who is a potential spouse, you owe it to each other, when you get deeper into your conversations, to discuss your expectations of intimacy within a marriage.
Yeah.
Your expectation of each other's needs being met, provision, protection, leadership, etc. If you can get these things out in the open and just talk about it and have understanding, you're going to find out whether or not you're going to be a good match.
Yeah. It's really important to have those conversations. And the thing to remember is, don't have those conversations too soon either. You want to make sure that it is at the appropriate time in the relationship. You don't want to stir up the emotions that do not need to be there until that time is ready. And each relationship is going to be a little bit different in regards to that timeline. There's no set timeline, but it is a conversation to go ahead and have in a dating, courtship, relationship. Now, if you're married and let's say it's been a little while, since you've been intimate together, you need to have a conversation and be like, hey, guess what? God's word says this. We need to go ahead and get back to this again. What is stopping us from this? Is it something physical that's going on? Is it something mental that's going on? What is happening that we're not able to go ahead and fulfill and do what God is telling us to go ahead and do? So those are conversations to go ahead and have as well in a marriage. And hopefully in a marriage, you're not going to be shy about it, but it also should not be in a disagreement either. It should be a good, calm, collected conversation to be able to have and be able to come together. The other point I wanted to go back to real quickly too, because I do want to put this disclaimer in here, is this was the culture back then in regards to having slaves and having multiple wives and things like that. That is not the way God originally intended it at all. We are not saying anything about polygamy. We are not saying anything that is okay to go ahead and do, is to have multiple wives. So I just want to make sure that is very clear in regards to our message, is we are not saying that is okay to go ahead and do. That was their culture back then. Like I said, it was very different than what we live in today.
Yeah, just because the Bible describes a behavior to us doesn't mean that it is prescribing that behavior to us. It's not telling us to go ahead and do that. We're going to encounter this a few times throughout this Torah portion.
Yeah.
It tells us what needs to be done if you go ahead and do something like this.
Yeah.
It sets up some boundaries.
Yeah.
But it's not telling you to go ahead and do this so you can fulfill this law.
Exactly.
Like if you happen to mess up and do this, then this is how you take care of it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Later in this chapter, let's read verses 15 and 17.
Sure. And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Well, that's not good. 17. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. That's not good either.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strong language.
Yeah.
So these judgments, these Mishpatim, expand on the fifth of the 10 words, the 10 matters or 10 commandments that tell you to respect or honor your father and mother. Verse 15 speaks of physical abuse, striking, where verse 17 speaks of verbal abuse, and neither of these is to be tolerated.
Correct. That's not good, you guys. Like, if you're in a situation like that, or you're doing that situation, you need to stop. You need to get some help. You need to get some professional help, and you need to go ahead and stop. And God can go ahead and help you in regards to that. And sometimes you need to involve some professional help to be able to stop that behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spoke last time in our video for Parsha Yitro about how your experience with your parents is a strong influence for your expectation of how marital and parental roles work. Well, this time we're going to focus on another part of that relationship with your parents. Your ability to respect and honor your parents throughout all phases of your life. Now, everybody watching these videos is more than likely 18 and above, so we're not going to speak as much to the children phase as we are to the adult phase of your relationship with your parents. Although the obligation to obey your parents is not binding on adult children unless you still live in their home, and then that's another situation. But if you're an adult child and you don't live in your parents' home anymore, then you don't have the obligation still to obey them. But the obligation to respect and honor your parents will always be binding. If you disagree with your parents, then you have to do that respectfully.
Yeah.
If they ask you to do something that conflicts with your faith, you have to be able to say no in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
So throughout our lives, we have to honor our parents both physically and verbally, and that is a huge deal, and it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So this is an aspect of a potential spouse to ask about and understand, what does it mean to them to honor and respect their parents?
Yeah.
What is their attachment level to their parents? Are they able to say no to them in a respectful manner?
Yeah.
Whose wishes are going to be the priority in your relationship? Your spouse's wishes or your parents' wishes?
Yeah.
And another thing to really think about is going into another phase, a latter phase, when you're an adult, is if your relationship with your parents shifts into caretakers, how are you going to maintain honor and respect for them at that point, especially when you have to make decisions for them that they don't agree with? How are you going to continue to respectfully help them to understand the decisions that you have to make on their behalf? So there's a lot of things to think about in honoring and respecting parents, and what does the other person think about that, and how are you going to be able to do that together for both sets of parents if both sets of parents are still alive?
Yeah, that's true. Those are good conversations to be able to have, is what's going to happen when one person gets older, when they get older. How are you going to go ahead and take care of your parents or your possible in-laws? What provision is being done to go ahead and figure that next step out, because life happens. You never know, if something is going to happen and all of a sudden now you're having to go ahead and take care of somebody else. And so it's a matter of having those conversations, but it's also a matter of learning to respect them, and if you have had disrespect, you might need to call and apologize. You might need to go back and be like, Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry that I disrespected you in regards to this or that. It's okay to go ahead and do those things with your parents. They're going to respect you for going back and apologizing. And again, you're still not, we've talked about boundaries, you're still not letting go of that boundary if you have to have a boundary up, because it is not a healthy relationship. And you have to have certain communication boundaries set up. We're not saying to break those boundaries, but there's ways of saying it and still have respect for your parents.
Yes.
There's still ways of being able to have that respect for them.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that transitions really well into what we're going to talk about for the rest of this chapter. Going back and if let's say, for example, in the past you have been disrespectful verbally, hopefully that's the extent of it, and not actually striking your parents. But when we look at verses 18 through 36, this section of the Mishpatim, the regulations, it's about personal responsibility and liability for your actions or lack of actions. And so the intent of these judgments is not punishment, but justice and restoration. So when you're made aware that you have wronged or mistreated another person or their property, do you own it? Are you able to go ahead and accept the responsibility for your part in it, your liability in that? Or do you play the blame game, trying to shift your part in the matter to somebody else? Do you just deny responsibility and liability? Yeah. So, I mean, this is huge about being able to accept responsibility and then go ahead and do what you can do to be able to restore the brokenness that you have caused in either a huge part or a small part, whatever your part was in it.
Yeah, yep, it's true. It's good to have restoration, and come together for that.
Yeah. So I mean, have you been looking for this trait in a potential spouse?
Yeah.
Have you heard them discuss about a time where they realized, that they did something wrong and they did their best to try and fix it? Or have you had a conversation where they said something that maybe you took a little offense at, and they understood that at a point, and then they did what they could to fix it. That means that they were able to own, their part in that, and they did their best to go ahead and restore it. And that's huge. That's what these regulations are for. It should be the character of all the children of Israel to be able to acknowledge and accept our responsibility and take the appropriate steps to restore any brokenness that we have caused.
Yeah.
Let's go to chapter 22.
Okay.
Now, in chapter 22, there's so much going on. So we're just going to pick one of them out and we're going to talk about it. And that's going to be chapter 22, verse 16.
16. And if a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife.
And 17.
If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins.
Okay, so again, we're talking about the treatment of women in that day and age. And if you go and do your own studies, hopefully you have done your own studies, you've seen that this is somewhat radically different from the other cultures there. So God is installing some protections for the ladies in Israel that were basically not really existent in some of the other cultures at that time. It's like building from the ground up and trying to get it not from where it is, but to where eventually he wants it to be. But the thing that we want to talk about is sex. It's an act that is reserved for a marital relationship. And we see here that having sex before marriage resulted in a duty for the man to offer marriage or pay a dowry to the woman's father. And the father made the decision as to whether or not to allow the marriage. But what we're going to pull out of this is that sex equals covenant commitment. Yah is not recommending premarital sex. Like we said before, he's just spelling out the consequences of what happens if two people go ahead and make that decision. Because we're not talking about a rape here. We'll talk about that later on the road. The Torah does talk about that. But this is two people who are having consensual sex. So, at some point in the near future, we'll be doing a video interview about sex and what happens in your minds, in your hearts, your emotions, your bodies when you engage in that level of intimacy. So, definitely look forward to that. But we just wanted to go ahead and bring out, if nothing else, that sex is an act that equals covenant commitment. So it doesn't need to happen before that covenant is made.
You need to make sure that you are in a covenant relationship. Have the wedding ceremony, celebrate the marriage, and then enjoy the wedding night with having sex. Versus doing it the other way around and be like, let's go have sex, and then a month later, 6 months later, we'll go ahead and have the wedding ceremony and just call it be marriage. That's not it, you guys. That's not what God wants us to go ahead and do. He wants us to go ahead and have that ceremony, that proposal time frame and that engagement time frame, and be able to celebrate that marriage together with our family and our friends or intimate people. Maybe it's just a close group of people, that you're doing that with, and then you're able to go ahead and enjoy, your wedding night and enjoy that true intimacy of what God really intended for that to go ahead and happen. Again, you need to set up those boundaries of what is allowed. How far are you able to go ahead and go, and how far does God's word say I can go ahead and go? When you look at the opposite sex and be like, okay, this is my brother, in Messiah, this is somebody who God loves as his child, am I going to treat them the same way as I'm going to go ahead and treat a stranger or somebody else? What am I going to go ahead and do in regards to that? It's a matter of learning to have respect for yourself and have respect for that person, to make sure that those boundaries are set up and make sure that you have that clear message of this is what is okay and this is what is not okay.
Definitely.
So be looking forward to that video. We're excited about it.
Definitely.
So,
Let's read chapter 23, verses 1 through 8.
You shall not bear a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man to a malice witness. You shall not follow a multitude in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute. Where am I going to?
8.
Okay. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him. If you see the donkey or one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it with him. You shall not pervert the justice due to your needy brother in his dispute. Keep afar from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the guilty. And you shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just. Be nice to your neighbor.
Be nice to everyone.
Yeah.
So the common theme of these Mishpatim is truthfulness and impartiality.
Yeah.
Now, I think we probably have a pretty good grasp on truthfulness, and we're all still working on that too. But a huge issue is impartiality. It's difficult for us to treat an enemy or one who hates us in the same way we would treat a friend or one who loves us, to treat a stranger in the same way as our family member, to treat the powerful person in the same way as the weak. As difficult as this is to do, it is at least the goal for the children of Israel, to treat everyone with respect, kindness, patience. That is the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Let's go to Galatians 5, and let's just talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
So Galatians 5, verses 22 and 23.
But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no Torah.
So this is supposed to be our attitude towards all people.
Yeah.
And while that is mind-boggling to us, this is how we are to walk as image bearers of God, because I don't have a verse to just nail it down for you, but you probably all recognize the fact that God is impartial. He says that a lot. I am impartial. I don't show favor one way or the other. I'm a God of justice.
Yeah.
But using the fruit of the Spirit is a very good guide to see if it's somebody that you would be interested in matching up with. Because if they're not doing that, or they're actually doing the opposite of those things. I mean, imagine the opposite of one of those things.
Yeah.
You don't want that going on inside of a relationship.
No, when you're starting to date somebody, you're starting to look at somebody through a different lens of like, could this be a potential spouse? You almost want to put their name before it and be like, is so-and-so gentleness? Is so-and-so self-control? Is so-and-so against such things there is no law? Are they patient? Are they kind? Do they have goodness? Do they have faithfulness? If you put their name in front of that word, you're able to be like, okay, they have almost all of these except for maybe this. And maybe I could ask them and be like, why are you impatient sometimes? Or why are you, kind here but not kind here? Maybe they don't realize it. Sometimes you're blind to your own issues. Because you're single, sometimes you become so selfish or so involved in your own self that you don't realize some of those things. And that's where a spouse comes in, or a future spouse comes in, or a really close friend, and be like, do you realize that you're this way? Do you realize that you say this or do this? And if you have a really good close friend, you're able to go ahead and do that with them and be able to be that iron sharpens iron, and be able to talk to them. And then they're going to be like, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that I was this way, or even a coworker. I mean, jobs nowadays give you feedback. I used to have feedback sometimes once a week, sometimes would be once a month, And they would tell you, Sarah, do you realize that you're doing this? Do you realize that you're doing that? And sometimes I didn't know. I couldn't hear it in myself. I didn't realize that I was that way. And you have to self-examine and be like, okay, I get that. I understand that. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and change and work on it. You know, and I used to have 3x5 cards hanging out with me, you know, just with a word on it, you know, or I would have it be a screensaver on my phone with a word on it of being gentle, being kind, you know, self-control, you know, because it was something that I struggled with. You know, we have a big sign in our house that says, today I choose joy, you know, because we need joy in our life. We need happiness in our life. We need that, you know, today, no matter what happens, I'm going to choose joy. And so there's certain times where it's like you have certain words in your life, and that is something to look at. And when you're looking at a potential spouse, it's like, okay, do they have these things? You know, before I ever said I love you to Mark, I read some of this and I was like, okay, God, is Mark this? Does he have these things? You know, or am I in this love phase and not being able to see the different things of what was going on? And I wanted to make sure that I knew some of this and I knew what Yeshua would say about love, and is that what I felt towards, you know, Mark. And so I did a study on it. Both of us did, not even realizing we were doing it at the same time, you know, but we both did because we wanted to make sure that our relationship was on the right track, going in the right direction for that, because we've made mistakes, you know, and we didn't want our relationship to be a mistake. We wanted it to honor God and do the right thing. And that really helped to be able to just read through some of that and be like, is this person this? Is this person this? Is this person this? And we're not saying perfection, you guys. We're not perfect at all. We still get mad. We still get upset. We still get frustrated, you know, but we are able to come back and be like, you know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to do that. You know, I didn't mean to get frustrated or upset or whatever, but you're able to calm yourself back down again and realize, okay, I made a mistake. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the idea is this their character. You know, the phrase like that's really out of character for that person. Well,
Yes.
that means that when you do something like that, make a mistake, that's not your normal way. So you're doing something out of character. Well, we all do things that are out of character from time to time, but what is the norm?
What's the norm?
What's the character?
Yeah, that's true. That's good.
The next place we're going to look at, because we may not understand this partiality thing as difficult as it is. Let's go to Yaakov, to James chapter 2, and read verse 8 through 10.
8 through 10. If, however, you are fulfilling the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are coveted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles is one point. He has become guilty of all.
So, according to Yaakov, to James here in 9, if you show partiality, you commit sin.
Yeah.
And whoever should guard all of the Torah, but yet stumble in one point, do this sin, then you're guilty of all. So this partiality, I'm just saying, it's a thing to be looking at.
Yeah.
It's a thing to look at. So how do we treat our neighbor?
Yeah.
Who is our neighbor? Well, if we go to Luke chapter 10, verse 29 through 37, Yeshua tells this parable about the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
And he tells us that even our enemies, those who hate us, are the ones that we are supposed to help and show kindness to. And where does that come from?
Yeah.
Well, he said it first in Exodus 23. When you look at chapter 4, when you meet your enemy's ox going astray, you shall certainly return it to him. You do this for your enemy.
Yep.
If you see him who hates you, the donkey of him who hates you lying under his burden, you shall help him.
Yeah.
So you're not supposed to be partial.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do these things? How are we going to be the same way to everybody? I mean, you were talking a little bit earlier, you know, maybe your potential spouse, let's say that you're in a restaurant and they are showing you patience and they're showing you kindness, but then they don't show it to somebody else in there. That's kind of the ways that you can kind of weigh these things. If you're talking to somebody over the phone that's working for a company, and they're just doing their job, trying to do something, and you're not showing patience, the same way that you would to say, your family member.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things that we have to work on, is displaying the fruit of the Spirit in all circumstances.
Yeah.
So let's work on that.
Yeah.
All of us, we've
Yes.
got a lot to work on that as children of Israel. Let's work on not showing partiality.
Yeah.
The rest of the chapter 23 transitions from our horizontal relationships over to our vertical relationship with Yah.
Yeah.
And basically what it's talking about, Yah is giving us a roadmap on how to maintain and grow in relationship with Him. And the roadmap that He gives us is His appointed times and offerings. So we learn through these what He desires to maintain good relationship with Him, to put Him first, to meet with Him at the times He set up for relationship building. You may not have thought about it that way, but that's what the appointed time is really about. It's about relationship building.
Yeah.
And give Him the best of your resources. I've explained to a few people before, then I heard it taught this way. I think heard it taught this way. That you can kind of consider those appointed times like date nights. And if you think about it, there's at least 52 date nights built into our calendar every year.
Yeah.
Every Shabbat, date night. And then we get these other 7 special dates throughout the course of the year. So there could be as many as 59 in the course of a year, or sometimes it falls on the regular, so it's a big double whammy.
Yeah.
But, these appointed times are times to build and maintain the relationship. Now, if you set up date nights with someone that you're courting, or that you've been married with, and you skip out on it, or you check out in the middle of it and things like that, that's not gonna be good for your relationship. Yeah. So, definitely we can take the way that Yah has given us this roadmap to grow and maintain our relationships as a way to kind of transition and look at our other relationships. Yeah. Can you go ahead and give the best of the time that you give to people? We're not talking about the time that you give to Him, because Yah is first. But the time that you give to people, are you giving your spouse the best of that time? Yeah. The resources that you distribute to other humans, to other people, are you giving the best to your covenant partner, your spouse? That's things to look at. And that's the way that you're going to be able to maintain, make sure that problems don't arise and that things go smoothly, and also grow in the covenant relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's a matter of, do you still do those date nights? Do you still spend time with them? Do you still give them things of first, or are you giving them less? Are you giving them what is left over because you're so exhausted? Well, maybe you need to take some time and refocus, refigure things out, relook at the schedule, and be like, okay, what do we need to go ahead and keep? What do we need to go ahead and get rid of? How can I make this easier, for both of us and both of our lives? We talk about our schedule at different times. We have a food menu schedule. That helps us. Every single Sunday, we sit down, we talk about it, of what is going to be for dinner that next week. Mark goes grocery shopping and I work that day. And so it ends up working out. And then from there, we know exactly what we're going to go ahead and eat every single night. It helps us. We have Bible studies going at least either 2 times a week, some weeks, and other weeks is just 1 time a week, but we normally have something going almost every single night. And so because of that, we have to be consistent with what our schedule is going to be. And for us, having the food schedule really helps us to be able to know what that is. Because then when we both get home, from work, or I stay home, I close my office door, when Mark comes home, we're able to go ahead and give to each other what we have, versus giving us leftovers, or because we're so exhausted and we're like, I don't know what to have. I don't know what to do, because you're so exhausted by the end of the day. It's good to go ahead and have it be done right now. So then you're able to have the rest of your night being able to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and when life is busy, it's good to have those times that, like, we don't necessarily always know what we're going to be doing, but we know we're going to be doing it together.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that we have that time, that one-on-one time, that time to just, understand each other better, to love on each other, and just, make sure that you have that time programmed into your busyness of life.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up this Torah portion in chapter 24. Basically going to be speaking out of 1 through 8, but for time's sake, we're not going to read it. But basically what we've got here is the covenant is consummated. In chapter 19, we saw the covenant proposal. In chapters 20 through 23, we saw the terms of the covenant relationship, or ketubah, spelled out. And now we see the consummation of the covenant. As the people say in verse 7, all that Yah has spoken we shall do and obey.
Yeah.
Now, obey there is Shema. We've spoken about Shema a lot, and there's a good reason for that, because it's all over the place. If there's anything that Yah likes to tell us a lot, is listen up. And as we've said, it means to pay attention, to listen, and then respond appropriately. It's not just listen, it's not just pay attention, but then respond appropriately. Now, anytime that Yah tells us to Shema, then obviously the proper, appropriate response is to obey. And that's why that's a really good translation right here for that all that He has said to do, we will do and obey. We're going to Shema, go ahead and obey whatever He has to say to us in the future. But this is also a great lesson for marriage. And in that a marriage relationship is not, or at least should not be, static or stagnant, but it should be dynamic or growing. As such, we must continue to Shema to our spouse. That is, we must pay attention to the changes that occur over time in our spouse and respond appropriately to those changes. You can think of marriage as an ongoing investigation of our spouse. We're observing and we're listening in order to gain understanding, so that we know who they are and what they need and how we can help them to grow into their potential. And they're doing that for us as well. So, we're not only growing with them, but we're doing things that actually promote their growth, both of your marital relationship and of each other personally. So a big question that comes out of this is are you ready for this level of commitment? It's a wonderful thing, and we commend it to each and every one of you. But these are the kind of questions we must both ask ourselves and a potential spouse to determine if we are suitable for marriage.
Yeah, you have to continue to pursue the person that you are married to. Just because you're married and you got them doesn't mean that it ends. It doesn't mean that you don't have to continue to pursue them at all. If you want to have a romantic marriage, if you want to have a storybook marriage, it takes work. It takes discovery and getting to know them and figuring them out, and all of us continue to change, and we all continue to grow, and we grow up, from being little kids in a baby marriage to being, teenagers, to being adults, to being retired. You all have stages of life in regards to having kids, to, no kids, to having kids, to having them be older, to growing up, to being empty nesters again. You have all the stages of life, and it's a matter of each stage you're going to learn something different in your spouse. And are you still getting to know them? Are you still learning what their likes and dislikes are? I've been in this kick of hot tamales recently, and so I can blame my older brother for it. And because of that, Mark's been getting me, hot tamales, to these little candies, to be able to go ahead and eat,
It's my fault.
It is. And then the other day, he eats oatmeal a couple times a week for breakfast. So I got this cute little bowl for him that says yummy on it. It's little things like that just bring life and is just fun to go ahead and do for a spouse. It doesn't have to be huge and large and cost so much money. It could be something so small as that. you know? But it's a matter of getting to know them and continuing to discover them and continuing to obey and listen and Shema and hear what they have to go ahead and say. Maybe they just want to sit down and have a conversation with you. You know, maybe they just want to sit and just watch a movie with you. You know, it's a matter of just being together and figuring that out.
Yeah. So studying this partial Mishpatim through the lens of relationship, it's provided many lessons for us in the areas of maintenance and growth of our relationships. We discussed intimacy expectations, the role of sex in marriage. We looked at maintaining honor for our parents throughout all stages of life. We talked about partiality and its consequences, as well as accepting responsibility and repairing brokenness. We also saw that the Elohim has provided a roadmap to maintaining and growing in our covenant relationship with Him through His system of appointed times and offerings.
Yeah.
That this is also a picture of how we maintain and grow our marital relationship with our spouses.
Yeah.
The key to covenant maintenance and growth is Shema.
Yeah.
Is we have to continue to listen and pay attention to our covenant partners and then respond appropriately, so that we can grow in our relationships, so that we can maintain our relationships both in our horizontal level and in our vertical level.
Yeah, we want to have that intimate relationship with our fellow humans, but we also want to have that relationship with God as well, you know, and to be able to have that one-on-one conversation, sit down with Him. You know, that's why He created Shabbat. That's why He created us to be able to sit down and have, you know, Shabbat with Him every single week, to be able to reconnect with Him, you know, and hopefully we're doing that the rest of the week as well. But the Shabbat definitely is for that too. So, yeah. Well, we are glad you guys have tuned in. Make sure you like and subscribe to our videos and to our channel. You can also go to our website as well. We are writing blogs about these Torah portions that we are studying to give you a little bit of other tidbits or insight of what we have gained from studying. And so we just appreciate you guys being here. We also have a Facebook and Instagram account as well. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.